Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Teen Dating Violence 101. My name is JP Butler, and I am the Outreach Coordinator of Safe Shelter of St. Vrain Valley. We are a domestic violence victim services nonprofit operating out of Longmont, Colorado. And my experience really kind of runs the gamut of youth programming, including being a youth mentor and advocate, and also being a motivational speaker as well. And one of the things that we have at Safe Shelter is we have a youth program that is based off of prevention education. And two of my students are here with me tonight, and they are going to be presenting this webinar with me. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and also the youth program.
So I'm Helen Abby, and I go to Silver Creek High School, and I'm a senior, and this is my third year in TERA.
I'm Emily. I go to Silver Creek High School as well. I am a junior, and this is my second year in TERA. So TERA stands for Teens Ending Relationship Abuse. We're a group of youth leaders in the St. Vrain Valley School District in Longmont, Colorado.
So mainly what we do is we educate high school students about dating abuse and violence and healthy relationships. I've enjoyed TERA so far because it gives me the opportunity to meet kids from other schools and from all the districts, and we have a good time when we come together for our TERA meetings. It's always a fun time, and it's a good group of kids, and I like volunteering my time towards an organization like this.
Yeah, and I'm very similar to Helen, but another thing I enjoy is being able to go and present to these ninth graders and to let them know how awful abuse really is and to help them be able to stop it.
So our objectives that we have tonight are understanding the dynamics of domestic violence and dating abuse, being able to recognize possible signs that a youth may be in an abusive relationship, and for you to know the best ways for you to talk to a youth when you think they may be in an abusive relationship.
And this webinar is full of information. And if we're going too fast, let us know so that we can clarify what we've said by typing into the question and answer section. If you have questions, write them down in the question and answer section, and we'll get to them as fast as we can. Remember that we are always able to answer your questions over email, phone, or in person even after this webinar is finished. And please remember there is about a 20 to 30-second delay when you are sending in questions and us receiving it.
So for those of you who are joining us for this webinar and may not have logged in using your Google account, you probably will not see the question and answer section. So that third bullet point will be very important. And what you can do is you can go to the description of this webinar to figure out ways to reach out to Safe Shelter or myself or my students. And that would be the best way for you to get your questions answered, is by using those resources in the description.
So we're going to start with what we see a lot. And so some things that I've seen as a student in high school with relationships are, you have those friends that get into relationships, and once they're in the relationship, it seems like they're gone because they're so isolated and they're always spending their time with their partner and they're not spending as much time with their friends. Along with that, nowadays, social media is really relevant in relationships. And so you'll see jealousy over social media. You'll hear things like, why did you like her photo? Or who is that guy? Or why are you best friends with him on Snapchat? Things like that can really work in an abusive relationship. Along with that, physical and sexual boundaries can be pushed through pressuring that person. So a lot plays into that with the pressure. These high school students are just trying to figure out what their boundaries are, and so oftentimes they can be pressured into crossing the boundaries and then feel guilty over that. And
Looks like we have a little bit of an issue with a little bit of technical issues. Looks like we got it. So So sorry about that, but we can go ahead and get started again. Helen, if you want to go over your last bullet point.
So continuing on with guilt trips. So this is when the partner or an abuser may make their partner feel guilty for not doing what their partner wants. And this is different from having a concern and bringing it up. For example, if you are concerned that your partner isn't spending as much time with you as you'd like, you'd bring that up and then you guys could healthily solve the issue. In a guilt trip, it's where you would put it on them and say, oh, you don't love me enough to stay with me, or using excuses like that to make the partner feel guilty.
So things I see a lot are texting communication versus real communication. And this has happened to both myself and my friends, where someone will say something in a text message or like a Facebook message they don't actually mean, or that they won't actually say to you in person. Another one is threatening to self-harm or commit suicide. And this happens a lot more than people actually think. It's where the partner will use self-harm and or suicide to keep a relationship together, or to get something out of a relationship that normally people wouldn't give. Another one is roughhousing leading to physical abuse. This is where like people will like mess around with each other and it's cute at first, and then it starts escalating to where it will get to leaving bruises or scars. And then sometimes we don't take each other's feelings as seriously as we should. And this also happens quite often, where one person will feel very passionate about something, but their partner will just blow it off and say stuff like, oh, that doesn't really matter, or why do you care about that? It's stupid. And so those two slides are just what Helen and I feel, and we don't really have statistics to show that, but we do know that 1 in 3 teens who choose to date this year will experience some form of dating abuse, which includes emotional, physical, and sexual abuse.
So the definition of teen dating abuse. It's a pattern of intentional behavior used by one person over another person in a dating relationship in order to gain or maintain power and control over that individual. So the reason that intentional is underlined is because this is intentional. You know, the abuser doesn't accidentally abuse the partner. They are doing this with intent. Another reason that partner or pattern is underlined is because it's a pattern. You know, we don't consider one abusive behavior as a sign of an abusive partner. It happens multiple times and becomes a pattern. And this is all about the power and control. And that's another reason that power and control is underlined, is because the intent and the pattern all are used to maintain that power and control. And Emily will explain that a little bit more.
So the power and control wheel. The center of all relationships is the want for power and control. What abusers will do is they will use many different tactics to try and gain or maintain that power and control over their partner. We will be going through each of these categories so we can dive into some of the tactics that are used in teen relationships. So the first one is emotional abuse, which includes humiliation, making them feel guilty, making them feel bad about themselves by putting them down, calling each other names, making them feel crazy by playing mind games, making them feel afraid by using looks, actions, or gestures. Now, the one that really hits home for me is calling each other names, because I had a friend in elementary school who would line up every girl that in the class and go down the line and tell us if we were pretty or if we were ugly. Now, I stayed friends with her because she was the only person who actually would talk to me. And because of that, she was able to control me and what she could say to me. And that is where the cycle can get really vicious and bad.
And that's what's important to understand about emotional abuse, is that what we're looking for here is either extreme fear and the abuser making their victim feel afraid, or it is lowering someone's self-esteem. And so we will be going over that a little bit later, but those are the two components of emotional abuse, is really thinking about how an abuser may use certain behaviors or tactics to create fear or to lower their partner's self-esteem. And that's really the core of emotional abuse.
So next on the wheel, we have using status and privilege, which includes making all the decisions and using social status or labels to get what they want. For example, we're in a relationship, so we should be doing so-and-so. But we don't want to get indecisive, confused with abusive. So if you have a partner that's just simply indecisive and can't make up their mind a lot, it doesn't necessarily mean your relationship is abusive because you're making all the decisions because they can't decide. The difference between indecisive and abusive is that the abuser doesn't give the chance for the partner to even have the option to decide. You know, it's all about them making all the decisions. It's up to them no matter what. The other partner doesn't have a say. And social status, it kind of goes back to guilt trips. They can use that social status to kind of guilt trip their partner. And we see that in high school relationships when an upperclassman is dating a lowerclassman, for example, a senior is dating a freshman. They can use that kind of social status and that, oh, well, I'm way older than you, to kind of maintain that power and control over their partner.
So the next one is physical abuse and intimidation, which includes smashing or destroying property, abusing pets, displaying weapons, hitting, punching, kicking, slapping, blocking exits or doors, and threatening to harm you physically. And one thing I want to point out is only one of these actually involves the abuser touching you, but physical abuse can be any one of these things listed. And so I had a friend who worked at the Humane Society here in town, and she would get pets in all the time who were abused, and those were warning signs that the pet came from an abusive household. So what you can see is abusing pets may be a key sign of that the person is not a very good person and will physically abuse people.
And along with that, it can be hard for victims to recognize that it's abuse, especially if they have a partner that maybe punches the wall, and they'll say things like, well, he didn't hit me, so they don't really think it's abuse because, oh, he didn't hit me, he just hit the wall. But it is abuse, because when someone does punch the wall, you get scared and feel scared that they might punch you next. So we do consider that abuse, and it can be really hard for a victim to understand that. Next on the wheel is minimize, deny, and blame. So this includes not taking their feelings seriously. And with that, you know, we see everyone has that friend that uses the I'm joking card too often. And sometimes we see that in relationships, and a partner may say a joke that they know might upset their partner, but just say, oh, I'm just joking, but they know that it hurts their partner's feelings, and they aren't taking that seriously, and they'll continue to do it and make jokes like that, even though they know that it hurts their partner's feelings. Along with that, we have not taking the abuse seriously, denying that the behavior is even abuse, and blaming them for the abuse blow up. And so with the blame, it all leads back to like the excuses that they may use. So they may see things like, well, if you had just texted me, I wouldn't have done that. Or you shouldn't have hung out with so-and-so. And so they're using they're putting it all back on the victim's behavior and turning it around onto the victim acting incorrectly.
And so one of the things that we also want to make sure is absolutely clear is that if you do have a youth dating someone who cannot take responsibility for their own actions, that is a warning sign. Because what happens is that when the abuser is constantly blaming everything else, we have an issue. And so when they blame their parents or their homework or their job or their teachers, or what happens is that they get into a relationship where their partner has now become someone else to blame. And so when you are with an individual who cannot take responsibility for their actions, then that is a large warning sign that that youth may be blamed for a lot of different things that happen within the relationship.
So the next one is threats, which is threatening to spread lies or rumors, threatening to hurt their partner or a loved one of theirs, threatening to self-harm, which is cutting or eating bad eating habits, or etc., and threatening to commit suicide if a relationship were to end. Now, when we go and give TERA presentations to the freshman health classes, we ask them how common these things are, and they say that when students threaten to commit suicide or harm themselves, they say it's very, very common. And here at TERA, we take suicide very seriously, and we've had members impacted by suicide. And we know that when a student uses suicide as a threat to keep a relationship together, it is 100% abusive.
So next is sexual abuse and coercion. So this includes drugging or getting someone drunk to take advantage of them. And so, of course, you know, in high school there are high school parties, and I know a few people that have been intentionally gotten more intoxicated or more drunk just so they could be taken advantage of, or so that someone could hook up with them. And it's really relevant, and it can be very scary. Using pregnancy, real or fake, to keep a relationship together. Manipulating or making threats to initiate sexual contact. And then, of course, any unwanted sexual contact. And that includes, you know, pressuring for sex and going beyond boundaries.
So the next one is isolation and exclusion. That includes controlling what they do, who they see, who they talk to, or where they go, using jealousy to justify actions, and limiting their time with friends, family, or other interests. And with this one, there's a fine line between healthy and unhealthy. It's healthy when the youth chooses to hang out with their partner because you're in a new relationship, so you just kind of want to spend more time with them. So that's healthy. But it gets unhealthy when their partner starts to pull them away from their friends and their family and starts forcing them to hang out with them more. And for me, I had an ex-girlfriend who would tell me that she was going to hurt herself, and I would pull myself away from whatever I was doing and would put my whole effort into helping her not hurt herself.
Along with that, we see that a lot, and it can be really scary. I had a friend that happened to, and you know, they had a really controlling partner, and it came to the point where, you know, they couldn't even barely talk to me because she felt afraid that I would judge her or things like that. So it can be really scary for a teen, and it can be hard for them to speak up.
And finally, just to throw in my thoughts about this one as well, talking to your youth about jealousy may be a very, very important conversation to have. Oftentimes when we go in and give presentations, we talk to youth about whether or not jealousy is healthy in a relationship. There are many times when youth will say that jealousy is used as an excuse to say, I care about you, but they also recognize that jealousy, if it's taken too far, can become controlling and possessive. And so one thing that I like to do as a presenter, and you can do with the youth that you work with as well, is you can talk to them about what do youth say makes jealousy healthy. And what I hear constantly is that it shows that someone cares about you. And then you ask them, all right, so then when does jealousy become unhealthy? And a lot of times they will say something to the effect of controlling or manipulative or even possessive. So then the conversation from there goes to, okay, so I hear that there's a positive aspect of a relationship, caring about someone, and a negative aspect where you're controlling and possessive. And so what I encourage youth to understand is that when you look at the positive side, which jealousy may be a way of seeing that you care about someone, that there are millions of ways to show someone that you care about them, and that jealousy is probably one of the least impactful ways to show someone that you care about them. So just to throw that out there, because I know that jealousy can be a very gray area, not only for youth, but even for adults as well. And so it's a great conversation starter to see where your youth is at when it comes to how jealousy plays out in their relationships.
Last, we have abusing technology. So this includes making them send inappropriate pictures. And so that goes along with sexting. And First of all, during our presentations, we do make it clear, and we tell students that sexting is illegal and it's a sexual offense. And so, but that doesn't stop high schoolers from doing it. And so oftentimes they may use that as a threat, like, oh, if you break up with me, I'm going to show everyone the pictures that you texted me, or tell them what we did. Also, along with that is accessing their social media accounts and phone without their permission. So sometimes I had a friend once that her boyfriend made her give him her Facebook password and her phone password, and you see relationships where they go through each other's phones, and so that isn't the healthiest thing, unfortunately. And then dictating and controlling who they can follow on social media. So this, again, I mean, it just goes to show how relevant technology is in relationship nowadays, and how controlling that technology can be and social media can be.
And one of the other TERA students, when we come to this part of our presentation talking to students about abusing technology, she talks about when she got into a relationship at the beginning of the school year, and her boyfriend became so possessive of her technology that he actually got onto her social media account and unfollowed all of the guys that she was following. So he literally went through everything. He found her password and then found all of the guys that she was following and unfollowed them. So sometimes when you do have, when a youth has a partner that does that, that wants their password, that says things like, what do you have to hide? These are warning signs. These are red flags. And so talking to your youth about boundaries with regard to technology are also just as important as talking about physical and sexual boundaries.
So abusers will use any one of these tactics to gain or maintain that power and control over their partner. Now, when the abuser thinks those tactics aren't working anymore, they may resort to more extreme forms of physical abuse or sexual violence. By using a fear-based tactic, the abuser attempts to pull the victim back into the power and control.
So right here, you see we have the power and control wheel and the equality wheel, which you can download this PDF by visiting www.safesheltertera.org/TDVAM, which stands for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And so we use this as a resource when we go and we give TERA presentations. We give this to the students so that they actually can read and see what's going on the power and control wheel. On the control wheel. But it's also a really good resource if you need to talk to a youth and bring up that conversation and say, like, hey, do you recognize any of these signs, or are you going through any of this? And it's a good way to spark a rather tender conversation. Also, what you see on the right is our equality wheel, which is the exact opposite of the power and control wheel. And it's also a great resource to use for youth for them to be able to assess their relationship and see if they're in a healthy relationship or not.
And I have to brag about my students really quick, because what we did is that this idea of a wheel and even how this information is displayed has been circulating ever since the 1970s. And so the power and control wheel has been around for 40 some odd years. But what we did was we took the power and control wheel, because what has happened is that it's gone through so many iterations and so many changes that what we've done is we've changed the power and control wheel to many different populations. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that the information on the power and control wheel actually applied to teenage relationships. So when my students got together, we went through the power and control wheel and the equality wheel, both which you see right now. And what they did is they went bullet point by bullet point, making sure that number one, it made sense for teenagers, but number two, it actually happened to teenagers, that it was something that their peers were experiencing. And so this is a really great resource that was not only just checked on by students, but a great conversation starter for any youth that you have, whether that is your child or you're a youth service provider. You can download that on the website and you see it right there. Or you can even go to the description of this webinar and click on that link to download the power and control and the equality wheel as well.
So the next is the cycle of abuse. So the power and control wheel is all about behaviors. Now we want to talk about the pattern. To this we use what's called the cycle of abuse. The first stage of the cycle is called the honeymoon stage. We see this a lot when two people are starting off in a new relationship. They're excited, they're happy, they're glowing, and all of that.
So when the honeymoon stage starts to slow down and settle in, we start to run into pet peeves that our partner has. And so that's what we call them in a healthy relationship. There's pet peeves, which are normal, they come up. But in the cycle of abuse, we call it warning signs or red flags. So as these warning signs and red flags continue to build, they also build tension. And in a healthy relationship, this happens. There is tension sometimes, but the communication would allow two people to be able to talk through the tension and come to a compromise and work through the road bump. But in an abusive relationship, because the abuser typically blames the victim and also denies that the behavior is even abusive, the signs continue to grow and the tension continues to build.
Then there comes a point where there is so much that the relationship reaches the blow up and abusive stage. This is where the abuser resorts to more extreme forms of physical and sexual violence and tries to pull their victim back into their power and control. However, because this is a cycle, we have to get back to the honeymoon stage somehow.
So this is where the abuser will make promises and also try to make it up to their partner. The goal is to create the idea that they're still a good person and that they can work through anything and that they're so sorry and whatever it be. But the abuser is a very manipulative person, and so we'll have JP talk a little bit more about the mindset of an abuser.
And this is an important part of the, what we do when we go in. A lot of times just talking to anyone, youth or adult, about what is going on in the mindset of an abuser, sometimes it's difficult to comprehend. And so we definitely wanted to give you a little bit of insight into the mindset of an abuser. This is what I will say, though, is that what I'm about to present to you is not, it's a very common themes that run through an abuser, but abusers come in all different shapes, sizes, people, gender identities, sexual orientations, ethnicities, races, everything. So we cannot sit here and say that abusers come in one type. It doesn't matter who they are, anyone can exhibit abusive behaviors. And so what we do know, though, is that there's about 4 different things that I want to present to you that you may want to be on the lookout for when it comes to identifying an abuser. The first one is that it's so simple to look for someone who is very self-centered. Someone who is just so obsessed with who they are, what they're doing, what they're about. This is one of the major signs that you may be dealing with an abuser. Now, does someone who is very self-centered automatically an abuser? No, but in my experience in working with Safe Shelter and also with the Teens Ending Relationship Abuse program is that most abusers, if not all, are very self-centered. They love themselves too much to change. They love themselves more than their partner. And this is why it creates such a very tense relationship, because it's all about them. And so being self-centered is something that is a huge theme running through several abusers. And because of that, because they love themselves so much, they feel entitled to whatever it is they want. So I live on my own planet. I make all the decisions, and I'm entitled to whatever I want. So they feel like everything they want, the text messages, coming over to my house when I say so, having sex when I say so, they feel entitled to that. We are in a relationship, you are my partner, and this is what I want. And there's a difference between expressing what you have as needs in a relationship and feeling entitled to those needs. And so when you have someone who feels entitled, that is a very large warning sign for an abusive personality. The third one is that because of that, because they're self-centered and entitled, they're very manipulative. They love to treat their partner the way that they want to treat them in private, but when they're in public, they will try as hard as they can to make the relationship look like the best relationship in the world. It's the greatest thing. Don't we look so cute together? Ha ha ha, this is great. But then they will go right back into their abusive tendencies when they are in almost when the abuser feels like it's a safe space for them to engage in those behaviors. Like Helen and Emily said, this is very intentional. So they want to make sure that everyone around them is manipulated to believe that everything's fine and nothing's going on. So they will manipulate everyone, not only their victim, not only their partner, but their friends, their teachers, their peers, everything. Finally, this is the hardest one to cover because it complicates things a lot. Abusers like to play victim. So what happens is you may have a youth where both of them sound like victims. The problem is that if you want to know the easiest way to tell whether or not you have an abuser is who is taking responsibility for their actions. Now, here's the thing that may come up. You may have a relationship and two individuals who both can't take responsibility for their actions. We call those co-combatants. So we call those people, when they cannot take responsibility for what they did, they may both be exhibiting signs of abusive behaviors. So that doesn't mean that they're an abuser, but if you have someone, a youth, who says, well, I get it because I didn't text my partner, or I didn't go over when my partner asked me to, and they take it upon themselves, you have a genuine victim. When you have, an abuser who says, well, they don't do this, they don't do that, and, if they just did that, this thing that I want them to do, then everything would have been fine. You'll start hearing that they're blaming someone else. They're not taking responsibility. So they may play victim, but that will be the best way for you to identify whether or not they are actually the abuser. So what happens, though, is that the warning signs are seriously something that the victim sees, but it's not what the abuser sees because they're so self-centered. What they're doing, they think, is totally okay. So what they think is that their tension still builds, but it's because they're annoyed. They're annoyed that their partner is not listening to what they say, not doing what they want. That's why their tension builds. And then they reach the blow up in the abuse stage. They try to make it look like they're on the same page, but they're not quite there. And the reason why they do that is because they really want to keep that power and control. So when they blow up and they feel like they're losing power and control, or they're going to leave, or they really feel like they can't control them anymore, they'll make those promises. They'll try to make it up to their partner, try to make it seem like, oh, look, no, like I'm totally okay. I'm just like that person when we started dating. It's great. And so they'll make all these promises and try to make it up to them. But this is the one thing that abusers always believe, that the abuse, that we got to that stage because it was your fault. And that's what the abuser believes. So anything in orange is what the abuser believes. And so that's what's so important. Now, the last part of this whole cycle of abuse that's super important to understand is that many people ask, why do they stay in an abusive relationship? Why would anyone, with the bullet points that Helen and Emily went through, why in the world would anyone stay in a relationship where they were humiliating me all the time, that they always made all the decisions, that they threatened me by showing weapons? Why would they ever stay in a relationship like that? I will tell you that every single victim has their own reason and their own story. But the one theme that seems to run through many, many of those stories is fear. And so what's interesting is, as a quick story, there was a student who we have a resource called the TERA Textline. Students love texting, so what we did is we set up a system where they could text us questions at any time during the day, and my high school students and I monitor that and answer their questions. And and one time a student texted us and talked to us about, I am in a relationship. You came and you gave our presentation. It was great, but I know that I'm in an abusive relationship and I don't know what to do. As we talked with this student, what came up was that she was in a relationship and so were all of her friends. There were 8 of them. So 4 couples. And what she was most concerned about was, I know my partner is abusive, but if I broke up with my partner, then that means I would not be invited to date nights, and I would not be able to, kind of be in that social scene. I would be completely alone. And that's what she said. And what I noticed immediately was that there was a fear of being alone. And that may be a reason why someone stays in a cycle of abuse. And so that's some things that you can look out for. Is you can watch out for a youth who seems very afraid of what might happen, of being physically assaulted, of being alone, and you can listen for those things, and that may be the reason why they're caught in that cycle.
So some things you might want to watch out for in your youth are if they're always wanting to be with their partner, they become isolated. And along with that, being restricted from seeing certain friends if they have their partner saying, hey, I don't want you hanging out with that person anymore, or whatever it may be. So jealousy. And that can sound like, well, why didn't you text me? Or why haven't we hung out today? Or certain things like that. So if they're receiving frequent and or harassing texts from their partner, and it can be hard to monitor that because teens and youth are texting a lot nowadays, but if it comes up in a conversation and you realize that their partner is constantly texting them or harassing them over text, it's definitely a good thing to watch out for. So a sudden change in their school habits or homework or grades, maybe if they are suddenly not doing their homework as much, or their grades are starting to fall, or you have their teacher emailing you and say, hey, so-and-so isn't doing as well in class as they used to, that's a good thing to watch out for. If they start to make excuses and self-blame for a partner's behavior, so for example, if they say things like, well, if I had texted him, then he wouldn't have gotten mad at me, or if I had just done whatever it was, he wouldn't have gotten mad, or she wouldn't have gotten mad at me. Along with that is having them be really worrying about making their partner mad, and having that fear that anything that they could do might make their partner mad, and so they have to worry about what they do just because they might make their partner mad. And then, relationships are meant to be to help someone's self-esteem, not necessarily help it, but bring it up. And so if you start to see their self-esteem lower, it could be a sign, and it's something that you definitely need to watch out for. And with that lower self-esteem, it can eventually lead to anxiety or depression that they may not have had before, and now they have. And it's a good thing to watch out for. And in the worst case, sometimes it can lead to suicidal thoughts, and it's a really serious thing.
So now what you can do, you can model characteristics of healthy relationships, because us as high schoolers, we learn about what is good and what is bad from you guys as adults. So setting a good example for us to follow is very important. And listening without judgment. Coming down on us for a decision that we're going to make or we have made is only going to make us feel worse about ourselves and just worsen the situation. And ask questions. Encourage your youth to reflect on their own feelings by saying, how does it make you feel when your partner does this or when he does this? And don't lecture us. We sit in class all day long listening to teachers rambling on about stuff we don't even really care about. And hearing you guys just keep lecturing us on what we're doing wrong is just not helping us. And use your personal stories to help us relate to situations, but don't make it about you. And if you wish to point out a healthy behavior, follow up with a replacement behavior, because we have one-track minds, and if we're doing something bad, we don't know how to correct it or what a good replacement behavior would be. So always follow up and give us a replacement behavior that we can do instead. And then never talk about your youth's partner, because it may push them to be closer to the abuser, because that youth got into that relationship for a reason, whether they cared about them or whatever that reason is. And blaming someone that they do care about is not a good idea, and it will only make them hold on harder to that abuser.
So to that point, the way that you kind of work around that is when you do have a youth come up to you talking or concerned about their partner's behavior, and they say, so I just, I noticed this happening. Is that healthy, or is that, and you recognize that it's abusive? Some things that they don't want to hear. Why are you with them? You could do so much better. Why did you even do that in the first place? There are a lot of reasons why we get into relationships. And one thing that I like to strongly believe is that so many times adults and youth get into relationships for different reasons, but that's not why the conversation is happening. The conversation's happening because they currently have a concern. And so when you are talking with the youth, it's not about the decision that they made to get into the relationship in the first place. It's not about why didn't you recognize all the other signs. What we have to do is that when a youth comes up to us and says, this concerns me, we have to validate what they're saying, say, I hear that it's a concern to you, and use these bullet points that Helen and Emily brought up to really guide your conversation. Because when you sit there and you say, did you notice any other signs, or why didn't you break up with them when that happened, and when I was younger, blah blah blah. This is about our youth, and this is about their experience, and this is about their current reality, and you have to stay there. And even myself as a youth advocate, we have to be in the moment. They have current concerns. Obviously they didn't go to someone, or maybe they went to their friend when they had other signs come up, but you have to realize that they have now found the confidence and the bravery to approach you and talk to you about what they're going through. So that's what we have to remember, is that we cannot look back on the however many months or years that they've been with their partner and why didn't you recognize the signs earlier. That's not what that conversation's about. It's about their current reality. So what we're going to do now is we are going to answer a few of your questions that you may have. And again, any questions that you may have can be asked on the question and answer section. And I do see that some people have given some questions, and we have a few. And so we're all three of us are going to be put on the spot just a little bit. But these are some good questions. So if you are watching live, definitely stick with us. Even if you are watching this after the webinar is over, I think that you're just going to be watching this blank screen of answering questions, but definitely listen to the questions that are being asked, and take some notes. And if you have your own questions, definitely follow up with us and send us an email. So the first question, I think this is directed to the Helen and Emily, is what would you do, or what do you do when you see your friends in an abusive relationship? So what are some things that you two do when you recognize those signs?
So for me, Helen, it can be, it's a tough subject to bring up, and it's kind of hard. So if you are willing to talk to a friend about the relationship, it can be a hard subject to bring up. But if you're just with them, just you two, you can say like, how's it going, or how is it going? And if you see that something is abusive, you can say, hey, maybe that's point that out, that it is abusive. But then again, like we said, on how you can help, you can say, well, use a replacement behavior for that, and tell them about the resources, and ask them if they're like how they are, and how their well-being is, and just make sure that they're okay.
I don't know, did you have anything to add, Emily?
Not really. You kind of summed it up.
Well, and it's great when you have a presenter who does that. So we have another question, and I think it's from, I don't know if it's from a parent or something, but so what do I do when my youth doesn't talk to me? Why might my youth not say anything? So I don't know. Maybe this is a parent, maybe this is a youth service provider, but you two are teenagers, and there are people in your life that you trust and some that you may not approach. What are some reasons why an adult, like you wouldn't tell an adult what's going on?
Well, for me, I wouldn't tell an adult what's going on because I would kind of be embarrassed. Because like, this person is hurting me, and this adult is, I don't know why I always think this, but I always think that this adult is gonna like judge me on it. So then I'm kind of embarrassed by what has happened to me, and I don't like talking about it to an adult.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really right. I had a friend that was in an abusive relationship, and she was always afraid to talk to her mom about it because she was afraid her mom would just put her down and say, you know, like, what are you doing? Or why are you dating him? Or wow, he's such a jerk, you know, things that would really hurt her feelings. So she just never talked to her parents about it because she felt that they weren't open enough to just listen instead of and would be more of like put her down and make her feel like crap for dating whoever she was. And so I think that does happen a lot with high school students. I mean, not all. Some have closer relationships with their parents than not. But I think the most important thing if you're a parent and you're dealing with a youth that's in an abusive relationship is to mainly just like be there and listen and support your student, whatever they may do. You can't control what they do, so you might as well just like listen and don't lecture, but be there for support when they need it.
So I think this is a great follow-up question to that. So I guess for you too, so then who do you go to when you want to talk about tough topics? So, you know, we first had the question of why might a youth not talk to me? So now the question is, so then who do you go and talk to?
Well, for me, I would always go to my closest friends because they know me well and they would understand what kind I'm going through. So I would always go to my friends first, and then
yeah, I think that's really like in high school and like with students and youth. A lot of their support system is their friends. You know, when they have a relationship problem, they might go to their friends and say, "Hey, what do I do?" Or he or she's doing this or whatever they're doing. But then again, you know, for me personally, I'm really close with some of my teachers and some of my counselors, and I've talked to them about some things. And I think like with at least our school district, we're really fortunate to have the relationships with our teachers that we do. And so I do feel really comfortable being able to talk to some of my teachers, and I'm really like fortunate for that and thankful for that. So I think a lot of the times, there's just like whether it be a teacher or a mentor or a coach, there's people out there that students can talk to that may be, you know, less intimidating than their parents or, you know, yeah.
Awesome. So the next question we have is, it came from something that we talked about a little bit before, but, and I think, Emily, it was you, but it's open to both of you. You said it's common for high school students to use suicide as a threat to keep a relationship together. Why do you think that is? And why do they use suicide as opposed to any of the other bullet points that we found on the power and control wheel?
Well, the abusers will use suicide because it's like a big, serious topic and it's a scary topic. Mm-hmm. Like if my partner came up to me and said, if you break up with me, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't break up with this guy because I don't want to be responsible for killing him. Like, mm-hmm. If I broke up with him, it would totally be my fault. And it is a very good scare tactic that abusers will use to keep a relationship going because it's that fear of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, I agree. And especially in our school district, we've experienced a lot of suicide lately, unfortunately, and it's been really hard. And it's become a reality, you know, and when people say things like that, it can be really scary. And it's unfortunate that abusers can be manipulative that way, but I think it's very manipulative way that someone will use to stay in a relationship, and it's very scary. I've had it happen to my friends, and it's a really scary topic.
So the looks like we have another question, and that question is, what might you say to a high school student who is single? I mean, here we are talking about, you know, relationships and relationship abuse, and you know what, I'm going to throw my own question in there as well to kind of add to, which would be, what pressures are there for high school students to first get into a relationship, and then what might you say to students who are struggling with being single?
Well, I think one of the pressures out there is, well, everyone else is doing it. I have to fit in.
Mhm.
So I have to be in a relationship.
Yeah, especially like in high school. I mean, for the upperclassmen, like prom, everyone goes to prom with a date. You have to have a boy or a girl to go with. And so I think it can be like almost scary. Last year I didn't have a date and I was freaking out and I felt really pressured to go find someone to go with and, possibly even get into a relationship just to have a prom date. And so I think in high school it can be so like hard to deal with the pressures of, oh my gosh, she has a date, she has a boyfriend, I'm the only single one in the friend group. It can be really hard. Or, I don't get invited to the double date nights like JP was saying with the text line. Some people, it's really hard, and so I think that's definitely a really big pressure in high school. But I would say, like, if you're single, it's a perfect opportunity for you to fall in love with yourself. There's nothing wrong with loving yourself and learning to love yourself. So I think if you're single, and it can be hard to be single, you may feel alone but I think if you're single, it's like important to try and use that time to focus on who you are and who you want to be and what makes you happy and what you are looking for a relationship. So when that time does come, you know what you're ready for and you know what your boundaries are.
Yeah. And like when you are single, don't go seeking out a relationship just to be in a relationship. Wait for that perfect guy or girl to come along who is going to treat you right, who is going to do everything that you want in a relationship. Because those are the people who really count. I would rather have one good relationship my entire life than having multiple bad relationships.
So it looks like the next one is a really good question, and I think a question that even for myself I'm asked a lot, and that is, I have a child who has been in what I would say an abusive relationship for a long time, and I just keep seeing my youth go through the cycle. So what do I do? And I'll answer first, and then I'll open it up to my students. But when you are recognizing that a youth, someone that your child, if you are a service provider, one of your students, if you notice that they are going through an abusive relationship, you see the signs, they're not approaching you, you don't know what to do. One of the things that I would say, and I would love to hear, and you'll hear Helen and Emily respond here in a second, is just to continue to make your presence known in their life, to be able to just say, to check up on them and to say, I'm here for you. How's your day going? How's your relationship going? And not being really asking 20 questions or being intrusive. Act very casually, just like a normal day. How's your day going? And really make sure that your youth feels your presence. Because when the time comes that they are comfortable and ready to talk to someone about what's going on, then that will be an indicator that maybe you are someone that they could come talk to, because you're always there, you're really supportive, you always seem to be there for them, you're not overbearing. You want to make sure that you're not overbearing, but it takes a lot of courage when you are in an abusive relationship to seek help, and that's what's so difficult. We can look on the outside and say, I noticed that that this person is in an abusive relationship, but I don't know what to do. What we can do is we can just make our presence known, and it takes a lot of bravery for someone to, seek that help. And I don't know. So what might, Helen and Emily, what might you say to this, to this parent who recognizes that their child is just consistently in bad relationship after bad relationship? What would you tell this parent?
Well, I would.
Well, I was gonna say, I think, yeah, like JP said, it's just mainly important to know that you're there and you support them and don't hammer them. I had a friend who was in an abusive relationship, and her mom and dad were constantly like hammering her about it and constantly playing 20 questions, and she would get so upset. And honestly, I felt like she stayed in the relationship just to make them mad because they were always asking her about it, and she would get into huge fights with them about it because she was like, just stay out of my business, I'll talk to you when I want to talk to you. So I think half of it is letting them learn and do their thing, but also having them like, hey, I'm here, just being that constant support. And you know, a lot of it's their relationship, so they'll come to you when they need to talk to you, and you can always talk to them and just, you know that they support, make it clear that you support them and you love them. And
Yeah, and like for me, my parents tried really hard to like try and get me to talk to them, but they were also very forceful for me. So that was really hard when I was in my abusive relationship, because I didn't want to talk to them because I was afraid that they were going to be really forceful and start yelling at me, and we're going to get in this really heated conversation. So the person I went to was my Spanish teacher, who is basically my best friend, and she was so helpful. She listened, she cared, she offered advice, and she was just so helpful because she didn't judge, she didn't like she wasn't forceful either. She was just so kind and considerate and caring and listens.
Yeah, so I think like a part of that is just not judging and being a good listener.
Well, it looks like all of our questions are answered, and so this is what I just want to leave all of you with, is just the last bit of information that you will need for the for the end of the webinar. This is my personal information at Safe Shelter, and that information, you can find these slides in the description of this video. So you can download the slides, and then on the last slide, you will have all of this information. But please call me, send me an email. You can visit our website, or you can also visit the TERA website, download all of those resources that we kind of presented tonight. They're in the description of the video. And as always, just to let you know, this video will now be posted to YouTube and available for anyone to view. And so if you thought that this webinar was useful, we really encourage you to share this with your professional and personal social circles, and just letting people know that this is a free resource for them, just Teen Dating Violence 101. And what I would like to finish off by saying is, if you are joining us live, we are going to have future webinars, so continue to watch out for webinars coming from Safe Shelter of St. Vrain Valley and the Teens Ending Relationship Abuse Program. Until then, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope you have a great weekend, and hope you all just stay warm where you are, because it's kind of cold here. It's going to get cold here this weekend, so everyone take care, and if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.